The dust has finally settled from the trade deadline, and let's see what the New York Jets' new flight plan is heading toward 2026 and 2027, breaking down all the moves from the trade deadline and what we need to see as a fan base down the final stretch of the season. All this and much more coming up on this episode of Rich Sports Talk. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk, your home for all the latest and greatest on the New York Jets. It was a whirlwind yesterday. We took you up to the deadline, but now the dust is finally settled. Let's look forward for this New York Jets team and talk about all the moves that were made at the trade deadline and what it also means for this team going forward. Again, make sure to jump in on the live stream, comment below, super chat to jump to the front of the line. If you super chat, you guarantee the next answer question, and you also make a donation to the channel. Check us out wherever podcasts are available. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our latest live stream. So it was definitely a busy deadline for Darren Muji. It started with Michael Carter. It even ended last night with a last-minute trade for Jasir Taylor, the corner from the Chargers, for a late-round pick swap. So the Jets have added multiple players, 4 new players to this roster over this trade deadline period. There's a lot to talk about. And again, we can talk about the draft picks. We can talk about the cap space. We're going to talk about Sauce Gardner. We're going to talk about Quinnen Williams. But I want to start off with Darren Muji because this was a huge deadline. Let's be frank. This is a altering deadline for the Jets. And I'll give Darren Muji credit. They went all in on this rebuild. And I know there's a lot of scar tissue from Jets fans. Well, it's another rebuild. How do we trust these guys? And look, I can't tell you. You have to wait to see what the picks are. Again, I could see them using these picks to get maybe a veteran quarterback. There's a lot of options here. But when I look at what Darren Muji did, and I do think that Darren Muji made a decision. And unlike past regimes, he didn't do a half step. He didn't do like a half in, half out kind of move. He went full in. This Jet team, let's be honest, is not a good football team. They realize that this is not a good football team, and they need to rebuild this team in order to get this to be a competitive football team. And look, it is painful moving on from guys like Quinnen Williams. It is painful to move on from Sauce Gardner. But one of the things I look for in a good GM is someone that has foresight, someone that really makes an effort to have backup plans or be able to maneuver creatively. And one thing that we found out from Darren Muji with Sauce Gardner is the way they did that contract basically proved that this regime wasn't fully in on him. There are certain players that this regime has told us they love. They were not moving Breece Hall unless they got overpaid. They basically said the one player that was untouchable was Garrett Wilson. But with Sauce Gardner, when you look at that contract, and if you look back at the lack of guaranteed money, how friendly it was for the Jets, it was clear that they did this move in case they didn't love what they had. And let's talk about Sauce Gardner for a bit. When you're looking for players to fit this scheme, you're looking for guys who fit what Aaron Glenn are looking for. And I think Sauce has a lot of great things that he brings to the table. Sauce Gardner is a great coverage corner. There is no question he is great at locking down a number one receiver. He is exceptionally great at taking out a team's number one. Are there faults in his game? Absolutely. Is he a great tackler? No. Is he a physical tackler? No. Is he someone that can make a play on the ball and has great ball skills to turn into interceptions? No. I do think in Indianapolis, he's going to be in more zone scheme. I think it will be much more friendly to what he brings to the table. And I think it is a skill set that will translate very well there. So don't be surprised if Sauce Gardner is very good with the Colts. But here's the thing. I look at the guys that Aaron Glenn has brought in and the type of player Aaron Glenn loves. Aaron Glenn was a player that flew around the field without abandon, was a physical corner, loves the physical style. And look at the corners they brought in. Brandon Stevens, very physical corner. You look at Brownlee, very physical corner. A.Z. Thomas, who they drafted, very physical corner, big corners, guys that are not afraid to get their hand in the run game. And if you notice with Sauce, when Sauce tries to be physical, and again, I think Sauce has made the effort to be a physical tackler, but we saw it. He's getting nicked up. He's got the concussion that he missed last week for. There are certain things that when Sauce tries to be physical, it doesn't work out. And in this scheme, I think they realized this wasn't going to be the type of player. Yes, Sauce Gardner would still be a great player in this scheme. But in this league, in the National Football League, when you give a guy A+ money, which is we are making you the highest paid player at your position, you need to be an A+ player. And I think Sauce, for the most part this year, has been a B+ player. He's been a good player for this Jet team. But when you pay a guy elite money, and I think the Jets were seeing their early return on investment at 25 and didn't think long-term he would be the best fit in this scheme. They started to see some of the injuries coming into play. I think the Jets made a wise decision and basically took a Godfather-type offer for a cornerback, which, again, is a luxury. And I also look at this corner room. I don't think that this corner room is bad. And one of the things I really have hated from the national media, there's two perspectives that I hated that I heard about the Jets that I want to quickly debunk. The first one is, oh my God, you now have to draft another corner to replace Sauce. You have to draft another D tackle to replace Quinnen. You're not going to replace them right away, but let's not forget the Jets also invested in Brandon Stevens, Brownlee, and they drafted A.Z. Thomas. And again, I don't think A.Z. Thomas is going to be Sauce Gardner, but if he's a solid starting corner, the Jets can be fine with A.Z. Thomas. I think he's a physical corner. He's a dog. He has that mentality that I really think is going to fit well. And the other thing, too, with Aaron Glenn is he was a former corner. He knows what he wants in his corners. And if he felt Sauce wasn't the best fit, I like that they pivoted. This was one of the things I've liked with this regime. They have pivoted and tried to fix their mistakes and try to fill in gaps. They've addressed the wide receiver position. They've addressed the defensive tackle position. One of the things that drove me nuts with Joe Douglas and Mike Maccagnan and a lot of the previous regimes was they would make a mistake, but act like they didn't make a mistake or try to fix the problem. And I'm looking at this regime, and they said, look, we locked in Sauce Gardner. We thought it was going to be a great fit. It's not a great fit. We're a 1-17. It doesn't make sense to have this massive contract on the books long-term when he's not going to help turn this around as quickly as possible. And one thing that I also drove me nuts too was I heard this comment. I can't believe the Jets broke up a top 5 defense. I can't believe they would do that. There's two things with that. Number one, this was not a top 5 defense last year. And you look at this year, they are not a good defense. And here's the other thing. You know what happened when the Jets had those top 5 defenses? A little spoiler alert. You want to know what their record was? It was 7-10 and 5-12. So yeah, the Jets over this 15-year playoff drought, they've had great defenses. They've had very good defenses. But we've seen in this league, you can have elite defenses, but if you don't have the offensive firepower or the quarterback, you're not going to get far. Pittsburgh has had great defenses for years, and they can't get out of the wild card round. So when I look at the Jets dismantling this defense, yes, I know there's going to be great opportunities now for Ja'Whaun Briggs. The other thing, too, is they brought in some intriguing players who I'll get to in a bit. And yes, I know it's frustrating to lose Quinnen, but when you look at getting the Sauce Gardner money off the books and paying an A+ corner who wasn't being a great fit in your scheme, when you move on from Quinnen Williams, who basically demanded a trade and they did right by him, I think the Jets got an incredible haul. They got some good players back. And I do think there's certain things we need to look for as a fan base down the stretch. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, super chat to jump to the front of the line, your comments in the comment section. I'll answer your questions in a bit. But I did notice one very important thing with this trade deadline. Yes, the Jets are breaking up this defense, a defense that has been bad this year and probably is going to get worse now because they've lost some great players. And there's going to be growing pains with these rookies. But there is something. Did you notice one of the other side of the ball? This team did not trade Breece Hall. This team, I think, if I was the Jets, I think there's a good chance the Jets are going to pay Breece Hall because they're going to have a ton of cap space, including 2027. They're projected right now to have $209 million in cap space. They can easily make Breece Hall the highest paid running back in the National Football League. And you know what? I'll take that on the chin for 2 or 3 years, especially if I'm looking to develop a young quarterback and I'm not paying anyone. I'm fine with paying a running back. You can franchise tag him. Did you also notice, too, Garrett Wilson was the one guy they didn't answer the phone for? Did you notice how they were looking to add offensive linemen? And oh, by the way, what have they added to this team? They've added receivers. They've added players to this offense, which now all of a sudden, this offense could be better down the stretch, could be an opportunity to develop more, could have some good pieces to build around for next season. And I think that's the one thing that is getting lost in these trades by Muji. And I get it. The draft picks are sexy. I understand drafting a quarterback. The talks about moving for a veteran quarterback. And look, even the talks today of like, do they draft a quarterback in 2026? They don't love him. Do they go to the 2027 draft? There's all these different questions out there. But the one thing that I will notice is the Jets they're taking good risks on some young players. The thing I've really liked about Muji so far is I think his first draft was solid. But the one thing I've said about Muji and why I'm more entailed to believe in potentially this front office is he did something that was very important, which is they gutted the scouting department. They got rid of a lot of scouts that were part of this 15 years of futility. And I've noticed that their in-season scouting, their in NFL scouting has been very good. Brownlee has been a nice fit. I'm curious to see how Jasir Taylor fits. But the Jets have done something that's kind of been under the radar in terms of what they've added to this team. Yes, I know the draft picks will be important. They are premium picks. They're going to help potentially get a franchise quarterback. They're potentially going to be key pieces to address this team. They could turn to more draft picks. They could turn to players. But I want to talk about the players because the players have kind of been afterthoughts in this trade dead market. I mean, the Jets have basically, if you really look at it, they traded 3 players, Michael Carter, Quinnen Williams, and Sauce Gardner. But at the same time, they've added Mazi Smith, John Mechie, A.D. Mitchell, Jasir Taylor. They've added 4 new players to this team. And over the course of the season, when you look at all the trades, they've basically added 7 new pieces to this team that weren't a part of this really at the beginning of training camp. And I think that's very important. And I look at the guys they've taken outside Jasir Taylor. Again, Jasir Taylor, he's been a very good backup slot corner for the Chargers, has basically played in almost every game since drafted, has been a great special teamer. I think that means you can maybe see Quantez Stiggers getting some more play in the back end, although the Jets have activated Dean Clark at the safety position, and they basically are going to go with him the rest of the season, it would appear. So Jasir Taylor, I think, is a nice backup. But I look at the 2 receivers and Mazi Smith. Smith was a former first-round pick for the Cowboys. It hasn't worked. Mechie, a former second-round pick, and A.D. Mitchell, a former second-round pick. These are top 50 players when they were drafted. There is talent with these guys. And really, especially for the receivers, they really haven't got an opportunity. And Muji even talked about some of these players. With Mitchell, big, fast, physical, talented wide receiver. John Mechie, athletic guy, has inside-outside flexibility. Mazi Smith, big, talented physical defensive tackle that could help us in the run game. And the thing I look at this too is sometimes with these new chances, you get opportunities. Smith, for the defensive tackle, he's going to get an opportunity to play a lot down the stretch. And if he shows potential, even as an early down run-stopping defensive tackle, that's a great move and a controllable player. And sometimes we see this with former first-round picks that don't pan out in their first stop. Sometimes they need a bit of a wake-up call. Maybe this is a wake-up call for Smith that the team that drafted you doesn't believe in you. And maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. And maybe this adds motivation to Smith. You never know. Sometimes when you're discarded as a former first-round pick, it lights a fire under you. Did that with Mekhi Becton. Remember, Mekhi Becton refused to play tackle, other than left tackle, but then he got humbled. He got kicked to free agency. No one wanted him. Basically had to move to guard and agree to play with the Eagles, and that's worked out well for his career. I look at Mechie, got buried in the depth chart with Houston and with the Eagles. Now he's going to get an opportunity here. And then I look at basically, AD had an embarrassing moment early this year, got benched, got humbled, and now was traded. And look, these are guys that I'm not saying I need them to play up to where they were drafted. And again, if Smith becomes a really good first and second down defensive tackle stopping the run, And he's a nice role player for this team for the next 2 or 3 seasons. That's a position you don't have to draft. That's a position you don't have to fill. And when I look at the receivers, they're going to get a great opportunity. And our biggest complaint throughout the first half of the season was there's no talent in this receiver. This is a barren wide receiver room. Now, all of a sudden, you got some intriguing players you can throw in there. Allen Lazard's likely going to be cut or not a part of this team anymore. You're not going to have to see Allen Lazard trot out there. You're going to get 2 receivers who are under 25 years old get opportunities. Maybe this allows Arian Smith more time to develop. Maybe Arian Smith now is the 4th or 5th receiver, gets in better matchups now. Maybe this will help because Garrett Wilson's getting doubled and will help open up opportunities for AD and Mechie. And I'm not saying I know a lot of people they could be the number 2. They could be the number 2. If we come out of this season and I can say that between Mechie and AD, one of them's the 3 and one of them's either the 4 or the 5, that's great because you go into next offseason with your wide receiver room pretty much filled except with your number 2. And with the Jets draft capital in next year's draft class, it is an incredibly deep wide receiver draft. You can get a very good one in the first round. You can trade up to get one in the late first round. You can get a good one in the second round. It is a deep wide receiver class, and I think that is a good way to help build out this wide receiver room. And this Jet regime, and even though Aaron Glenn is a defensive head coach, I think they are wisely looking at this saying, if we're going to do this correctly, if we're going to actually turn this around, we need to build through the offense first. The offense is the most important thing. We'll figure out the defense later. We can hopefully develop the defensive guys along the stretch, but the offense has to be in place. They've done a good job on the O-line. I still think you can improve it. This is going to be a better position for a young quarterback or a veteran quarterback than ever before, because you're going to have some depth at wide receiver. You're going to have your true number 1 receiver, a good tight end in Mason Taylor. You're going to have 2 great tackles. This is a situation where you look at it is the best situation for a quarterback to succeed in a long time. This isn't Sam Darnold, who is playing with basically an expansion level offense. This isn't Zach Wilson playing with an absolutely horrendous offensive line. And here's the other thing. This has been a proactive GM. They have gone out and constantly looked to upgrade this team. The thing that always kind of drove me nuts with Joe Douglas is seemingly once the season started and there were holes, it was just like, well, I can't do anything. The season started. It's not a good plan to go into a season with a tackle that is 40 years old and then not do anything when they get hurt. It is not a good plan when Aaron Rodgers goes down and you don't get a backup quarterback. It is not a good plan when Zuerlein last year can't kick a field goal and you don't even go with the notion of trying to replace him. It is just frustrating. And look, I'm excited to see these players down the stretch. I have a lot to talk about them coming up in the show. But overall, I think the Jets had a great deadline. And I do think it's interesting with some of the players that they kept. Look, I think Jermaine Johnson could be a nice long-term piece. And I don't think the Jets were real. I think the Jets were listening to offers. But if they got an offer for Sauce, where it's you can't turn that down. If they got that for Jermaine, I think they consider it. But I think he's going to be someone to keep an eye on. But one intriguing player that is still here, and I talked about a lot on the show yesterday leading up to the deadline. I basically kept saying I was just waiting for Quincy Williams to get dealt. I'm like, when's Quincy getting dealt? His brother's not here. When's he getting dealt? And I had a thought. It is clear that Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn are willing to admit that they make mistakes and move off those mistakes. Do I think that they loved the fact that they extended Sauce? They felt like he wasn't the long-term answer there, and they moved off of him. They've moved off of mistakes, and they've admitted that they've made mistakes. Jamien Sherwood is interesting. Now, his contract is a nightmare in terms of the dead money. But do they view Quincy secretly as maybe the next team captain, even at the age of 29? Before this, I thought he was a goner. Sherwood was going to be the middle linebacker, but it doesn't seem like they were shopping Quincy as actively as I thought. And maybe there's a thought, especially again, now with all this new money and all this new riches in the chest, do they look at Quincy and say, even if he's good for 2 years of a 3-year contract, he's worth keeping around. He's worth keeping over Jamien Sherwood, and maybe there's a team we can trade Sherwood to. because Sherwood might have a market. You never know. Jets could eat some of the money. Maybe Robert Saleh calls and says, hey, I want to reunite with Sherwood. Maybe Jeff Ulbrich calls. Maybe Joe Douglas calls. Like there could be a market for him this offseason. So with Quincy, I was pretty much thought he was gone. And again, some of his tweets yesterday showing that he was a bit surprised that he wasn't dealt or kind of was in an interesting situation. But maybe the staff views Quincy as more of a leader than we do. Maybe Quincy is going to be a part of this team and be the veteran leader in the middle of this team. I just look at this opportunity and look, I give Quinnen Williams also a lot of credit, was thanking the Jets, had a really nice statement saying there's still a great relationship. They knew I was frustrated. I think the world knew I was frustrated. Like I said, any ultra competitor, any guy who plays this game is going to be frustrated if you win 100 games and lose that one. He said, the relationship itself has never been bent, has never been broken. I still believe in what AG is going to do there. They're great guys, and the leadership that he has and that he's doing is going to be great for those guys. And the way that Darren has handled everything, there's going to be great. So, look, I give a lot of credit to Quinnen Williams. Very class act, especially on the way out. But we'll get to what I think this coaching staff has to do down the stretch. Again, Aaron Glenn addressed the media, basically said that this was an opportunity, especially with Sauce Gardner, that was the only reason why he was really dealt. But, you know, I do think Jermaine should be a captain for this team down the stretch. I'll be interested if they make Quincy a captain down the stretch as well. But let's get to some of your questions. Again, Super Chat to jump to the front of the line. I could see us trading with our top pick and go all in for 2000. It's a possibility. I don't think they really wanted to trade Brees. I think if it was a great offer, they would consider it. It just never felt like they really were that serious. And again, I know the rumor Kansas City offered a fourth, but again, I'm the Jets. Why am I giving Brees Hall to help the Kansas City Chiefs win another Super Bowl? 1-7. I wouldn't have made these trades, but I'm loving the returns, man. 1-7. It makes so much sense. And I knew Drones would like the Sherwood comment. And look, there could be a chance, Drones. Like I was actually thinking of Drones the other night because I was trying to wrap my head around what Quincy to me, he's an expiring contract. Wouldn't you take anything for him? And maybe there's internal talk with him where they're saying, hasn't really worked out with Sherwood. Yes, Quincy's older, but we're going to have so many young guys on the team. Maybe he could be a guy that we build around. So that could be definitely someone I could look at. JW, I don't know why people are sleeping on Adonai Mitchell. According to Rosenblatt, New York Jets strongly had A.D. Mitchell to be a part of the Sauce deal. He has the potential to be the Jets number 2. I like the upside. I really do. Again, even if he's a solid number 3, that's still another position or depth in the wide receiver room that you don't have to address. And I think that's very important. And look, I think they're trying to help Justin Fields. I think they're trying to help this offense develop. Like, look at the players they've added. Yes, I know they've broken up parts of this defense, but they've added pieces to the offense. And I understand that these are dice throws, but at the end of the day, these are still young receivers with a lot of upside. I mean, Adonai Mitchell is 6'2" and ran a 4.36 at the combine. Like, this is a guy who's not only big, he's explosive. And again, I know he was embarrassed early this year with the fumble on the goal line. Again, that is a brutal one, and I understand it was not a good look. You look to Indianapolis has some solid receivers in front of him. I thought it was a good trade, and I like that they're taking low risk. Again, he's a controllable asset. He's a second-year player. You got 2 more years of control after this season. Like, it is smart to keep guys that are controllable assets that don't cost you a lot of money. The Jets kept Quincy because I expect to play a comp pick for him and tag Brees. Look, I think Brees, there's so many options. Like, I would tag Brees at the very least, at least have one more season. And plus, he needs to get his value up anyways. Like, even he needs to finish the season strong. If he finishes the season like he did against Cincinnati, a lot of good things are going to happen to Brees. He's either going to get the highest paid contract from the Jets. He's either going to get tagged by the Jets, which will make him one of the top 5 paid in the position. Or if he goes to free agency, he's going to get a bigger number, which also helps the Jets because he'll get a higher comp pick. Again, JW, I'm still doing the process. It's still a long season. And again, it changes every week. My personal favorite as of the moment is Mendoza. I just really like the touch. I really like his accuracy. But again, I'm still going through the film. There is a lot to talk about. All right, Harlan Abraham. Mitchell drops the ball a lot. He'll fit in with the Jets receiver. I'm wondering if Harlan Abraham is a Colts fan. So we will definitely see. Mitchell, according to, I'm just trying to bring this up really quick. I'm trying to see how many drops that he does have. I don't know why they just don't give a drop stat like on some of these ones, but so far 9 catches, 150 yards. Again, I also did think yesterday with Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell, I looked at the other Jets receivers. You know where he would rank with receiving yards among the Jets receivers? He'd be 3rd right now. And Tyler Johnson's just slightly ahead. So this is a guy that's also been benched for the Colts, hasn't got a lot of time, and he's still better receiving yards than what they have on this team. Has no built-in excuse not to win. I'm guessing you mean another win. Look, this is the thing, too. Yeah, I don't think a 7-year deal is on the table. And look, I'm glad Breece is here as well. I think he's a building block for this team. Again, you look at Detroit, they built around the running back. They built around 2 great running backs. And you're going to have likely a young quarterback within the next 2 years. So it just makes sense. And again, you're not paying anyone. Pay a running back. It doesn't hurt. Like the Eagles paid a running back in Saquon. Do you think they regret that? Do you think the Lions regret paying their running backs? No, I really don't think they do. And look, again, we have to see what Mitchell and Mechie does. Look, they're dice throws. If they don't work out, the Jets basically took dart throws on them. And I'm not asking Mechie to be this team's number 2, but if he can finish this season, I feel he's a good number 3. I'd be very happy with that. And the thing I look for, too, is he's a guy that can stretch the field. I mean, his yards per target this year, 9.5. So he's a guy that can definitely stretch the field. His longest catch this year was 75 yards. The Jets have been looking for that over-the-top guy, a guy that can take the top off the defense. Arian Smith is not that guy at this point. This also helps Garrett because you got to keep an eye on Mitchell or else he's going to beat you over the top. And Mechie, I think, is a guy that can bounce inside and outside. He's not as explosive an athlete, but I think he's a solid route runner. I think he's a decent possession receiver, works the middle of the field. I really liked him coming out of college. I had him as a late first-round pick on my board, to be honest with you. So I really like Mechie again. The brutal blow he had with the leukemia, but you also love the story. And again, he seems like an Aaron Glenn guy because of the perseverance that he has. And Mazi Smith is another one. It's a dart throw. If it doesn't work out, who cares? But you look, there's a reason the Jets are taking risks on guys that were top 50 players in the NFL draft. You know, usually in an NFL draft, like once you get through the first 60, 65 players, there's a severe drop-off after 65. There is basically it's very close after that. So these are guys that had talent. There's a reason why they were targeted. They have talent. They have ability. And they're taking dice throws. Of these 3 players they've gotten in these deals, even if one of them is a solid starting player or a solid guy that gives you key reps, that's still a good value. Like you made sure to include these on these trades. Like they were the icing. They were the cherry on the trades. They weren't the main part of the trade. But overall, I like that they're taking risks. And so far, Brownlee's been really good for this team. Jawan Briggs has been very good for this team. Harrison Phillips has been a nice player for this team. I mean, the trades and the players they brought in have been very good. So good question there, JW. There's yes and no. So Mechie, because of the leukemia, missed his entire first season. So technically, he's coming to the end of his rookie contract. However, since he missed that first season, he becomes a restricted free agent, meaning that the Jets get the first crack at him. They get to offer him the first contract. Now, other teams can match that offer or exceed that offer, but if they do, they have to attack a compensation pick to it. So it is a very controllable asset. And all the Jets have to do if they like the player is put in a little bit more money and they get the player. So with Mechie, especially with the salary cap, what the Jets have now, I do think he's going to be a part of this team. And look, he's a controllable asset. He's not as controllable as AD, but he's still a very controllable asset. So I hope that helped you as well. And again, they might not have those picks. Like they could trade back. You can trade up. It gives you flexibility. You can go out and get a player potentially. Having the picks is all about how you use them, obviously. But do you move up in the draft? Do you move back? Do you add pieces? Like there's a lot the Jets can really do. And again, they have a lot of the offensive line figured out, which I think is important. I'm excited to see what they can do. And look, I like that they're taking dice throws on some of these players. I like that they're taking young, controllable players who now have a chip on their shoulder. I mean, Mechie and AD are going to get opportunities with this team. You look at Smith, I think he's going to get key opportunities down the stretch. And look, here's the biggest thing I look for this coaching staff. Again, I see Jets people reaching out to Quincy asked about the Quinnen trade. I ain't really had time to think about it. I've been messing with my own issues right now. I haven't had time to think about it. So the thing I look for too is I do think there's a lot on this coaching staff. It's clear that they're going to be back for at least next year. I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to make these trades, I think, if Woody Johnson had any inclination that they weren't going to be back next year. There's going to be, I think, some ugly games down the stretch, especially with this defense. But here's the things I want to see. And I think we as Jet fans want to see, and I think it's very important. We want to see, can the guys that they have brought in continue to grow? Can they continue to get better? Let's start with the offense. Tanner Engstrom. I think he's shown some flashes, especially after the last game. Can he continue to just make Justin Fields viable? Again, I know Fields has his limitations. I don't think the way Tyrod's injury is, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm kind of surprised the Jets haven't signed like Desmond Ridder or someone at this point because I don't think Taylor's healthy. We'll see if that comes down the pike later this week. I look now at Tanner Engstrom. Can he develop these wide receivers? Can he continue to utilize Breece Hall in the game plan? Can he continue to grow a role for Isaiah Davis? Can he continue to then, when Braylon Allen eventually comes back, have a role for him? Can he get Mason Taylor more involved in this offense? And especially with these new receivers, because again, I don't think they had talent in that room or viable players, but now you got a little bit of upside. Now you got a little bit horsepower in that wide receiving room. It's not just the ghost of Allen Lazard, basically. Can you find ways to get them open? Can you find ways to get Garrett Wilson open? And look, Engstrom, I think the play calling's gotten better down the stretch, but I want to see him continue to develop. And then I look at this defensive side. The defensive side, I do think there is definitely going to be tough games. You're going to play the Bills again. You're going to play the Ravens. There's going to be games where they don't have the firepower on this defense. That is definitely clear. This team has to be competitive down the stretch. You can't get blown out of Foxborough. You have to sneak a game or two here. Like, you want to make an impression, go out and win the Cleveland game. This team has been horrendous after buys. Go out and win the Cleveland game. And I also think it would show this fan base something because you basically gutted the heart of this defense. But if you can go out and give a good, solid performance, especially defensively, I think that says a lot about how these guys are buying into these coaches and how they're being coached. But down the stretch, I want to see key things because there's some key pieces on this defense that we have to have questions about. Can Jermaine continue to be healthy and evolve into a 3-down defensive end? This interior defensive line, Jawan Briggs is going to get a lot of snaps. Smith is going to get a lot of snaps. Can you develop them to the point where we feel that they at least are good role players? Will McDonald is an explosive athlete. I don't think they've utilized him correctly the first half. Can they get him going and get him right down the stretch? Quincy and Jamie and Sherwood, they've had their lumps this season. Can they get on the program and can they turn it around? Can Kiko look like an early down linebacker? But I think the secondary, can Brandon Stevens continue to perform well? Can Brownlee continue to play that slot very well? And again, there's going to be a lot of pressures on these rookies, especially in the secondary, because Malachi Moore is going to take his lumps down the stretch. Can we get to the end of the season and say, pencil him as a starting safety? I'm not saying they have to be great, but can they be a starting caliber? So I don't have to answer that question or go and find that piece in the draft. Can he be a starting safety? AZ Thomas, I was very impressed with his first performance. Can he continue to build off of that? Can he continue to look like a starting corner? Like, can we, at the end of the season, if I'm looking at this defense and I can say AZ Thomas looks like a starting corner, Brandon Stevens looks like a starting corner, can I say that Brownlee looks like a starting slot corner? Can I say that Malachi Moore looks like a starting safety? That is big because that in your secondary is your 1, 2, 3 corner and one of your safeties. It's a lot easier to then say we can find another safety, whether it's free agency or the draft. The linebackers, can Quincy or Jamian Sherwood really establish themselves in the middle of that defense? And also, this is a great opportunity. Can you develop a leader? Can Jermaine take that next step and be this team's captain? Can Will McDonald continue to improve? And look, you have some young players now with Smith and Jawon Briggs. Can one of them flash on the interior? I think that is very important, and I need to see that development down the stretch. And the same, like I said, the offense. Can Membu continue to get better? Can Olu and this line continue to get better? Can you continue to give Mason Taylor much-needed reps? I'm not saying the Jets are going to win a lot of games. I think we know they're not. But can we see them build off of what they started last week with their last win? Can they look like a respectable team? Can they look like a team that can compete every week? And again, I'm very curious to see this defense too, because I'm seeing that, the thing. So, Harry, I think that is a very interesting question with the defense. So I see a lot of talk about going to the 3-4. There's a case that they could. Now, the Lions, I think what you're going to see is what the Lions do, which is they use a 4-3 base, but it does a lot of 3-4, 2-4 concepts. So I think you're going to see a lot of different fronts. You're going to see a lot of 4 down, a lot of 3-4, 2-4. But again, with those concepts, can you stand Will McDonald up as a 3-4 outside linebacker on some of these schemes? And look, sometimes now I think you're going to have to get creative, especially with the lack of defensive end left. I would like to see, can you maybe kick out like Jawon Briggs to defensive end in a 3-4 front? Like have a front where you have Harrison Phillips as a nose tackle. He's played nose tackle before. Jermaine maybe with his hand there. Maybe you can go a heavy 3-4. Jermaine stands up on the outside. You have Will McDonald stand up on the outside, and then you roll with Smith, Harrison Phillips, and you look Jawon Briggs as your D tackles, and you just do a massive defensive tackle front. Like that could be a look I want to see. I want to see creativity with this defense down the stretch. That's very good as well. We are Danger Zone. Again, Danger Zone will be on Friday nights on his channel. Make sure to give him a like and subscribe. If Danger Zone wants me to come on this week and talk about the trade deadline, I think there's a lot to discuss. But again, I know he's busy at the construction sites right now. Much like Darren Muji, Danger Zone is building strong foundations. So good to see Danger Zone here as well. They do need more linebackers. I'm curious to see this, Harry, too. Like, I feel like this Jet defense, part of the problem with this defense is I think they're going through this transition. And you saw it earlier where they were trying to do like a hybrid. They try to do their defense, but you had zone guys out of position. Then they try to do hybrid. I think you're going to see this defense look more like it's supposed to down the stretch because you've got a lot of guys that are comfortable in man. Jasir Taylor. I'm curious if Quantez Stiggers plays more safety. But you got guys that you brought in to play more physical man. Brownlee's a man corner. You got your guys that I think in the secondary can hold their own a little bit. If these corners can hold their own and be physical, the other thing too is can they blitz a little bit more? Can you get Will McDonald on some blitzes? Can you dial up some safety blitzes? I feel if they go, and again, down the stretch, get wild. They're 117. I want to see them get creative and do something a little bit crazy. But again, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Again, your comments. And I do think it's important too, and I actually was thinking about this for Sauce Gardner. I want to go on a little tangent here. And I think this is another reason why the Jets maybe moved off of Sauce is I feel like Sauce has not been the same player he was since his first 2 seasons. And I really did a deep dive into this. And I really think that Sauce is still a very good defensive player. I think his strengths are coverage, locking down a receiver. The knocks on Sauce right now, to me, are he doesn't have the ball skills to create turnovers. You hope he can develop that. Maybe he will in Indy. And the other thing, too, is, and I think this is important, we're starting to see it. And I know Connor Hughes has made a lot of points, and Connor Rogers as well. The refs are calling Sauce different now. Sauce has been, the first couple of years, you had receivers claiming how clingy he is, how much he's holding, how much he's grabbing. And look, there's holding and grabbing a lot with corners. But it is clear that refs have an eye out for Sauce now. It's clear that Sauce can get handsy and create these defensive pass interference penalties. And look, that's part of his game. He's a physical at the line corner. He doesn't want people to get off. But when you look at it, he's a very good athlete, but I don't think he's necessarily super twitchy, which is why I think you've seen him struggle. I think one of the clips that made the rounds actually was A.D. Mitchell when Sauce was on him. Like with some of the smaller, twitchier receivers, Sauce has trouble, especially getting some of the leverage. And again, he's still a great defensive back, but we've also seen that Aaron Glenn wants his corners to be physical and make hits and, make an impact in the running game. And the problem with Sauce is he's gotten injured doing that the last couple of years. He's gotten some nicking injuries that have added up. He's got the concussion he just got. And I also look at certain plays that stick out in my mind. I still look back on the Bills game earlier this season when Sauce had Josh Allen dead to right on a blitz, went high for a tackle. Allen slips out and is able to get a first down. So to me, I think there's a lot to like about Sauce's game. But at the end of the day, I think this staff and this front office was leery. And again, you look at the way they did the contract, they made it so if they wanted to, they could trade him. And I still think he's going to be a great corner. I think he's going to do well in the Colts system. They play a lot more zone, which I think is more his forte. I don't think they're going to ask him to be as physical in the run game as Aaron Glenn wanted him to be. And I look at Sauce too. Like I see Garrett getting better. I see Garrett progressing. And I just look at Sauce. I still think he's a very good player, but he never took that next step, at least with the Jets, to become an elite corner, which is you could still throw at him. And I know the stats about the yards at targeting, but you looked early this season, people were going at him and they were able to complete the passes against him. And I think the biggest thing with a corner is this. If you're going to get paid and be a top 5 corner, you have to be a game changer. And when I mean a game changer is they either never throw at you because you're that good, and they tend to stick away from Sauce, but they will throw at him. And the other thing too is you have to if you get your hands on the ball or it's thrown your way, you got to get turnovers. You got to force turnovers. And Sauce has 1 interception since 2022. He does a lot of things exceptional. But the thing is, I think if you were to be honest, I think this year he's been B+ to A- production, which is still very good. The problem is when you're getting A+ money, you got to have an A+ effort, and you got to be an A+ player all the time. Sauce is nice. They just never got better, and then earlier level he reached. This trade will most likely make him lock in and reach that level. We'll see, Drones. I think he'll be in a better scheme. Obviously, he'll be on a team that's hopefully going to have leads in games. But, I mean, we'll see. The Colts are a funny team to me because, again, I love their roster. I think they're a really good football team. But I still don't think – I think Sauce puts them in the conversation to make a run. I look at the Colts today as more of you hope they're last year's Commanders than a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Because, again, I just look at the quarterbacks, and Daniel Jones has played exceptional this year. But it's another thing when you have to go toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson. It's another thing when you have to go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. It's another thing when you have to go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen. I mean, those are truly heavyweight quarterbacks in the NFL. And even Justin Herbert, those are guys that are going to be heavyweights. And again, I think that this helps the Colts, but we got to see Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, we've seen it with New York. Can he stay healthy down the stretch? We know health has been an issue for him. Can he continue to not turn the football over? Pittsburgh game, I don't think Pittsburgh's that great. Didn't look that great. Yeah, Kev, I'm not sure. Again, I think it was more because people were saying he was handsy and that people were watching him more. So we'll see. Maybe it will change. Maybe it will definitely change. But again, like, and the thing too is they got 2 first-round picks from the Colts. Like, here's a scenario we'll talk about with the Colts. What if the Colts become the Giants? What if the Colts, maybe they win a playoff game this year? What if they give Daniel Jones a big contract and all of a sudden they have to let some of those big pieces go because you're paying Daniel Jones, you got to pay Sauce Gardner, and then all of a sudden they're not as great next year. He gets hurt early in the season, and then that great draft pick, oh, wait, it's going to the New York Jets. So, and look, Daniel Jones, like, you have to give credit where credit is due. He has been incredible this season. He definitely should win Comeback Player of the Year, in my opinion. Do I think he'll get consideration for MVP? I do also think he needs to get consideration. But again, 14 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, 69% completion rate. He's been very good. But I also look too, after that great game against Tennessee, the game against Pittsburgh was ugly. And you need him to rebound. And the thing too is, you look at Daniel Jones, he needs to stay healthy down the stretch. I mean, this is a guy who's only started 16 games once in his wild card. After year 3, 11 games. 2023, 6 games. 2024, 10 games. And so far this year, 9 games. But again, let's get back to some of your comments. Again, your thoughts on the trade deadline. Look, I think the Jets did the right thing. I think Quinnen Williams made it clear he wanted a new chapter. He wanted to move on. He requested the trade 3 times. And I also think, too, it's very telling. Joe Douglas in that regime at the beginning, I thought did a good job. But this regime, I also have to get credit for, too, because there's a lot of reporters and great reporters that cover this team. And the fact that Sauce Gardner's news didn't leak out until the trade was made, the fact that Quinnen Williams requesting 3 separate occasions that he wanted to get traded didn't come out, I do think is a positive sign for this front regime. But I just look at the players that they moved off of. They're great defensive players. There's no question. But the Jets have had great defenses. The Jets have had top 5 defenses. And by the way, for people that are like, oh, I can't believe they just dismantled a top 5 defense. Oh, no. It's been dismantling the last couple of years. It started dismantling after Joe Douglas made the great decision to not re-sign Bryce Huff, then not franchise tag Bryce Huff and let him walk for nothing. Also to trade for Hassan Reddick, who told everyone that would hear he wouldn't play unless he got a new deal. And then because you wanted to have enough money to sign Hassan Reddick, trade John Franklin Myers to the Broncos, who since that deal have had a top 5 defense for 2 straight years. And I don't think JFM being a part of that is a coincidence. So for everyone that's bashing this regime, oh, they're the ones that tore down a top 5 defense. First of all, it wasn't a top 5 defense this year. Second of all, it's been declining under the previous regime. And third of all, the Jets have had great defenses. They had one of the best defenses I've ever seen in 2022. What did it lead to? 7 wins. You know why? They didn't have the quarterback. They didn't have the offense. This, for the first time, is a regime that, to me, understands we need to get the offense figured out. We need to get the offensive line figured out. We need to get the playmakers figured out. We need to get the quarterback figured out. Once we figure out the offense, then we can patch the defense. That, to me, is very important because as great as Roberts, we talk about Robert Saleh, we talk about Todd Bowles, we talk about all these other coaches that have come through. How many years did the Jets draft defensive linemen? How many years did they take with their first overall pick in a top 10, top 15 to build out these great defensive lines? Like, ask the New York Giants. Yes, they have what I think is their franchise quarterback. But if you were to ask a Giant fan today, do you think they'd feel better if they drafted Armand Menbu or traded down to get Armand Menbu to protect their quarterback than what they've done? Look, the Giants, The Giants, again, I laugh with this, with every Giant fan saying there's such a big difference. The Giants have done what the Jets did for a long time, invested all these number ones on the defensive line. And what did it get them? I mean, they've invested a top 10 pick in Kayvon Thibodeau, a top 15 pick in Dexter Lawrence, a top 5 pick in Abdul Carter. And the last 9 games, the 3 of them combined for 3 sacks. You don't make an impact. And look, the defense is bad. I get the defense is bad. But you know what? The Jets offense needs to be fixed. Notice how Darren Muji, who again was a former quarterback, realizes, let me try to get as many pieces on offense. Notice how he didn't get rid of any offensive pieces. In fact, he added 2 receivers to hopefully, if one of them looks like a number 3, that's great. And you will take that any day to the bank. Momo, hello. Jets made a great moves yesterday. This is how to install a new one. And look, that's part of it too. And I think that's a very big part. And I'm not saying it's directly Quinnen or it's directly Sauce Gardner. But we as a fan base can sympathize with this. We have a lot of scar tissue watching this team. And there's a lot of guys that all they have known in this organization is losing. And there's certain guys that I think, like Jermaine, that really are all in on trying to break the cycle. But sometimes you have to bring in people that don't understand what losing is. You have to bring in people from a fresh culture. You bring in a guy like Brownlee, who was in even a worse situation with the tight ends, and basically is loving this new opportunity. And again, sometimes new opportunities are what people need in this league. Maybe Mazie Smith becomes a good first and second down defensive tackle. You never know. You look at these receivers. If one of them breaks, I think that is very important. But I think a lot of what they're doing is also what I think we've also talked about. You have to get rid of some of this culture. Sometimes you just got to break up a core just to get your people in and just to reset the culture. Because let's be honest, the culture for this team has been horrendous. It really has. And I just look at this team. I'm glad they kept certain players like Breece Hall. Like the Jets are making an effort to build out this offense. You know how you turn this around? You know you figure this out? You either go and trade for a veteran quarterback. I know people talked about Joe Burrow. Again, I think that's a Hail Mary. But if you draft a quarterback this year or you want to bridge until 2027, put the quarterback in as good a position as possible. And look, they need to build up this offense. And maybe this is also a bit of a reality check. 2022, the Jets had a great defense. We know that. We were excited with what Breece did. We were excited what Garrett did. We were excited what Jermaine did. And then they got Aaron Rodgers. And I get it. I fell for it too. We were excited about Aaron Rodgers. We were excited about the opportunity to have that quarterback that we've never had. But at the end of the day, were the Jets really that good? Were they really that talented? Maybe, again, we've said that this team is a very top-heavy team, but maybe the top-end talent isn't as great as we think it is. Part of it, too, is the Jets have been so bad. If we see a talented player, we latch onto them, and we want to believe that they are going to be part of the solution. But maybe this Jet team is great, because don't forget, like, Aaron Rodgers, and as much as Aaron Rodgers wants to bash the Jets made sure to have Garrett Wilson for him last year. They made sure to bring in Devontae Adams for him. They made sure to have Allen Lazard here for him. They had all these pieces on offense, and they still could only win 5 games. So I do think they're going to address the interior offensive line. Again, you have the piece with Tippmann. You have a lot of money now, too. If I'm them, I try to lock up Simpson. And again, with all this room, does it make sense to do this? Do you give AVT a really high-end 1-year contract? And then you go into the season, you go into the draft, you draft an interior offensive lineman early day 3, late day 2, and you have him as your interior backup or your eventual replacement for AVT if AVT does get hurt. I mean, the Jets, what they have done, which is very important, is they need to be flexible, and they are flexible. And right now, you have given this team flexibility and the options to do that. Right now, he is trash, but look, I like Brown Allen's physical ability. It's hard because I haven't seen it. You barely saw it. Like, again, part of my things, why is he on kick returns? But look, at the very least, I feel Isaiah Davis has done a lot. Maybe Brown Allen isn't your number 2 running back, but Isaiah Davis has shown a lot. I'm not saying he's bad, but what has JJ done? I mean, Jermaine Johnson, I mean, look, he's been a very good edge setter for this team. I think the problem is the injuries. Obviously, the injury, the Achilles last year, I think really derailed him. But again, he was a Pro Bowler in his second season. I mean, people forget that. I mean, when he played 17 games that year, he had 7.5 sacks. I know this year he's only had 1, but he's coming off the Achilles. The Jets haven't also been a lot pass rush situation. Like, maybe he's not a Pro Bowler, but I still think he's a solid player. Drone's bringing AVT back. If Brees asks for trade in offseason, what's most we can realistically get? So if that happens, I would franchise tag him. And I would say the thing I would try to also keep in mind, Kev, is I think the Jets' goal is to get a 3 because, again, they don't have a 3 from the Sonreg trade. But here's what the Jets could also do. Since they have all this front-end capital, don't forget, after all the comp picks from last year, they're going to, I believe, have between 8 to 9 picks on day 3. So could you throw in like a 6, like Brees in a 6 to get the 3? Maybe you could get a late 2 if you throw in a 4. Like, you can play around with it too. The other thing with Brees as well, if he demands a trade again, the Jets don't have to trade him. Again, if they offer to make him the highest paid running back, that also might change his tune as well. But I would also not rule out a player. Could you get a player, and maybe it's a late day 3 pick, but you get a player in return too. So you're not just trading for picks. So I do think there is a lot of different options there as well. And look, I do think AVT, like, again, they have so much cap space. Just in 2027, they're going to have $209 million in cap space. Like, they're not paying Sauce. Again, that extension didn't kick in. The dead money, I know there's dead money next year for Aaron Rodgers, but if I'm the Jets, like, you have options, and it's clear this coaching staff really loved AVT. They have a decision to make. They could just say, you know what? We just don't trust the health. We can't take a risk. If it also depends on what AVT wants. If AVT feels like this is the best place for him to get healthy on a 1-year deal to get that big contract, because let's be honest, AVT's looking for that big contract because AVT, again, was a top 15 pick, got a good rookie contract, but where you make your money in the NFL is on the second contract. And it's unfortunate because it looked like he was going to have a breakout year this year. And either if it's with the Jets or someone else, he was going to get that big contract. The question becomes, does he take a 1 year to stay here? Again, it's familiar. It's a team he's been with, he's familiar with. Does that help him? Again, I would offer him a 1-year deal with a lot of guaranteed money. Because at the end of the day, if he gets hurt again, it's a 1-year contract. It's a 1-year investment. So I would definitely look into do that. Let's see. Do we welcome a VT back? Oh, AVT. I'm like a Vermont for a second. For a 1-year deal, I would. I'm not sure if that is going to be possible. Again, I'm very curious to see what happens with AVT. It's going to be a talking point that I want to know at the end of the season as well. And look, I think everything has to be on the table. Let's see. Breaking from Rich Cimini, and I think this is important, and another big surprise with the trade deadline. So Justin Fields says he'll see about something, but I think this is very important. According to Rich Cimini, the Jets' defensive shakeup continues. Former All-Pro Quincy Williams has lost his starting job, he told ESPN. According to Quincy, my coaches told me I was underperforming, that I've been underperforming since training camp, he told me. Williams says he's, quote, not thrilled with the decision, but he's also not mad because he hopes to win his job back. So that, to me, is a big stunner. And especially when I started the show, like, well, maybe they kept him around for a long-term option. But this, to me, and again, I don't know if anybody offered anything to Quincy. I don't know what the trade market was for Quincy. And plus, don't forget, the Jets also made 2 absolutely blockbuster moves that we weren't expecting. And I'm wondering if maybe that also took away from trying to shop Quincy. But that is big news. And I'm surprised that Quincy basically has been benched. And that is definitely a surprise, ladies and gentlemen. I was of the opinion, again, when I did the deadline show yesterday, I think I was pretty vocal about this, that I thought that Quincy should be dealt for whatever you could get. If you could get a 5th, a 6th. I was more of the mindset I would have rather try to take a flyer on a safety just to see if you could find something down the stretch that could be a piece. But I'm just surprised too. Are they trying to have him earn his starting back? And look, I do feel like both Quincy and Jermaine and Sherwood have been underperforming. And this, according to Quincy, Quincy was asked if he thought he would be traded by the Jets. I don't know. I came in on Monday and it was the 2. So I didn't really understand what was going on. I kind of had those thoughts also, but it was one of those things where I told the Jets I wanted to be a Jet for the long term. He asked if he still wants to be a Jet for the long term. Yeah, I want to play football. I'm not going to lie. So maybe the Jets are using this as motivation. Again, maybe they're trying to get him. Again, Quincy also just came back off the injury too. So I'm surprised that Quincy's been benched, but again, could also be short term. If Kiko struggles, I think Quincy could easily get back into the lineup, but it'll be interesting. I mean, Quincy, I started the show thinking maybe he could be a part of it again. He says he wants to be a part of the long term of the Jets. We'll see. I would need to see Quincy's number to believe that he's not. I think, especially early, he looked a lot of out of position. I think Sherwood has played better down the last couple games. Again, the last game, I did not think he played particularly well, but I do think he's getting better. Quincy Williams so far this season, again, we understand he also had the injury earlier this year, missed a couple games. So far in 2025, has played 4 games. Played Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Tampa, and returned to the field with Cincy. Last week against UB hits. So far this year, again, 2 pass defended in that game. I'm kind of curious too, what his PFF grade was that game. I understand. And again, I think I use PFF as a good baseline. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. But I'm very surprised at Quincy. But again, we don't know what goes on in that building. And we talk about accountability. And look, we preached accountability, and it seems like this staff is definitely do it. I always seen Quincy's guys flying over the place, took a step down after the injury, but I think he's a quality linebacker too. And again, it's a benching, but a benching doesn't necessarily see the whole season. Again, believe it or not, I know this is going to be a mind blower to you guys because after the trade deadline, but there's still 9 games left to go this season. So there's still a long way to go this season. But again, my final thoughts, again, get your final questions in here. Super chat, jump to the front of the line. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our latest live stream. Always check us out wherever podcasts are available. And, of course, we'll be coming live after the Jets game this weekend. We'll do a preview on Friday for Jets-Browns, which could be a game that sets football back a little bit. But here's the thing. I think that the Jets did a great job at the deadline. I think that they have to build this offense up, and they have the capital to do that. And I understand the resentment that why should we trust this regime? We've been scarred before. And look, unfortunately, until the Jets get it right, you're just going to have to hope. And it's frustrating because we want to hope that this is the right one. Again, smash that like button, give us a subscribe. But with the Jets, I think they're doing the right thing. For so long, they've gone so defensive heavy. They need to go offensively. They need to build around the quarterback, and I think they're doing the assets. They took some flyers on some talented players in former drafts. They're good dart throws. I think they're educated guesses. And look, I'm not expecting starters, but they're good role players. I think those are still great trades. And at the end of the day, I think that this staff clearly has two things that they have done that I really appreciate, and that, again, gives me some hope. Number one, they are willing to move off of mistakes quickly or acknowledge that they've made mistakes. They didn't address the defensive tackle position early enough. They made trades to address it. They addressed Brownlee. They addressed adding more pieces in this wide receiver room. Again, it's an unconventional way, but they have addressed those issues. And number two, and I think that this is also very important, this regime seems to have a plan, and they also seem to have contingency plans. I think that the goal this season was come in and evaluate the players that were here. They thought they could compete with the players that were here, and they thought that there was more talent. Clearly, that has not been the case. And they have also added contingency plans. I think that now they realize we need to add a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We also need to break up this core and basically get as many pieces. But the thing that really stuck out to me about Darren Muji and why I think it is a good sign as the Jets general manager, he had the foresight to lock in Sauce Gardner to a deal that was favorable to this team, that the Jets gave him a lot of money, but not a lot of guarantees, which meant that they weren't fully committed to him. It was we like you, but we want to see what you can do. And it also gave them the leeway to do what they did, which is if Sauce Gardner wasn't under contract, I guarantee you he would be complaining on social media, be asking out and wanting a trade, and you would have gotten nowhere near the value you got for him. But since he was paid, he was obligated to, play the high role, play nice with this front office. But at the same time, it allowed a team like the Colts to say, you know what, it's a lot of draft picks, but he's a controllable asset. And I do think that is very, very important. And look, I understand people will look at this record. If the Jets end with the number one pick, they're going to clean house. I get the feeling that the staff is going to make that decision, because Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji would not have been given the green light to do this if Woody Johnson had any inclination that they would be gone. And say what you want about Woody Johnson, but at least for now, he is letting them make the decisions. Because again, it is not an easy decision, especially in New York, where it's all about attention. It's about the media. You're selling off two of your most important players, two of your most iconic players. And let's be honest, probably with Sauce Gardner, who was your most marketable player around the league. And they made a tough decision. We'll have to see what happens with the decision. But I agree with the decision. I think it was time to blow it up. They are a one-and-win football team. There is a lot of work to be done, and they've given themselves the flexibility to address those key positions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Rich Sports Talk. We'll be back with more great Jets content, a preview of Browns and Jets coming up this Friday, and, of course, coming to live stream after Jets and Browns this weekend. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our latest live stream, and check us out wherever podcasts are available. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Until next time, I'm your host, Nolan Rich, and this is Rich